Welcome on Why Arts podcast, Ron. I have been so inspired by you from like day one.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm so honored that you're part of this podcast.
Oh, thank
and
you.
Before we deep dive into all the beautiful things you do, let's start with introductions.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, also thank you for having me. I mean, I have always appreciated the intention that you bring to your arts work and the way that you integrate it, and have always integrated it into just the work that you do with kids, the work that you do in the world, and I'm so grateful to be here. And just so love that you also have been cultivating this space in this community. So thank you also for bringing this to us. Yeah, I mean, gosh, what do I say? I'm Ron. And my work, it centers on children and their lives and their worlds, and it's all about meaning making, right? I'm constantly curious how children are making meaning in the world through their social interactions, through their engagements with materials, through their engagements of art, photography, things like that. I think I'm just a person who's curious about children and their worlds, right? What is it like in that, how are they? What is it like in their minds and their worlds? And so that is kind of what inspires me in the work I do. It feels so rambling, right? But it's true, right? That's really it, right? I don't know. Yeah.
I love that. And I'm curious, before we dive into all the beautiful things you see,
sure.
What was your when you were growing up, when you thought
beautiful.
this I love doing this, I love playing or creating.
Yeah.
What was your moment which you remember?
Yeah. Oh, that's really beautiful. I think back to when I was in probably kindergarten, first grade.
Yeah.
And I just remember loving art class. I remember I loved drawing. And I had the best art teacher, Miss Connolly. She was amazing. She's amazing. Shout out, right? But really, she made us feel I don't know. I don't even remember the things that we did, but I just remembered that when we had art class, when she would come into the classroom and bring out different invitations. It wasn't even anything deeply Reggio, right? It was just sort of we had different things. We, played with paper and markers, and it felt good. And I think for me, that's when I realized I loved art. And that is kind of what started me, just always wanting to draw and make stories. Second grade, I used to draw, and I used to write stories and I'll always draw the pictures with them, because in early writers workshops, that was always a thing for me.
I love that. I always ask people about their early memories because I feel it starts so early, which we don't acknowledge. And because you had that beautiful teacher, because oftentimes when we don't have that outlet, it just gets stopped for children. And when we work with young children and we realize how much these early experiences matters for their whole life.
Whole lives, absolutely, right? Those things that feel tiny, right? Almost insignificant, right? Those things that are just a flash here, that flash is going to resonate forever, right?
Exactly.
With that person.
Which is so interesting, and that's why I would love to know how did that kind of start. You started working with children, you're an educator, and you research, and then you create storybooks. So
oh my gosh.
I would love to know how those inspiration kind of that journey led you on.
Absolutely. And feel free to correct course or move me around, as feels best, right? But because I feel it's such a winding road. I've always loved kids, and always loved working with children, or being with children. And then I think I realized that I loved the world of the early childhood, classroom or center. That wasn't until I got to college. I did research, the first year of my undergrad, that summer at being nursery school at Stanford, and loved getting to support running experiments, but really loved the classrooms. I had, again, another great group of educators, and I was like, oh, this is a space I could be in every single day. And so for me, that thread really, I think, developed then, right? So it's I had this idea of okay, I like artsy things, perhaps. I enjoy creating and making in some sense, right? It always has felt like that. But then so by the time though I got to undergrad, I think I had fallen into this idea of, okay, maybe I want to do something that works with people. And then I realized, I want to do something that works with children. And then, I did research for those 4 years of undergrad, which was great. And also really beautiful, right? But maybe not quite as I think it was just a different sort of research, right? Of course, right? It didn't have the relational interactive aspect. And so by the time I graduated, I realized that what I really wanted to do was teach preschool. I was like, okay, I actually want to be a preschool teacher, right? And so on some level, like that is kind of like I made the pivot basically. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go teach preschool, and so I ended up teaching preschool in New Orleans, which is where I'm from. That's my hometown. And again, landed with just phenomenal mentors there. A phenomenal teacher and my, friend Karen Soundstrand, who now, she works at like the Children's Museum in New Orleans now, but like then she was still in the classroom, and she and I just had like an amazing time. And then my amazing friend Claire, who started a nature preschool in New Orleans, and all my other teacher pals who have been part of that community. But they were really kind of like the cradle of my understanding of my work with early childhood, right? And so I think that like that is how I came to understand myself as not as just someone who thinks kids are interesting or fun or, oh, they're so cute, but also to like, in a way, and I don't know if this is what you're asking in a way, but like to also start respecting them on like a deep level. And I think I always had that instinct, right? Yeah. But to really see like what happens in practice when we start to treat children as the full human beings that they are. Yeah. And when I started teaching, finally, it was the first time I got to see that up close every day, right? Like, I think even researching, I'd gotten glimpses of it. Yeah. But being there every day was like, oh, wow, there's such depth here. This is amazing. There's just so much, you know? So, and I think and not to, I know I'm winding here, making sure I touch on things in story, but, and I think that, like, in some way, those experiences fed back into the art, right? Because I think when we're working with young children, again, a lot of us perhaps are picking up materials again that like we also don't, we don't know like everything about, right? It's like I'm now using pastels for the first time in 10 years. Like, okay, here I am again, right? Like, try this out. Yeah. But on some level, I think just like, that reintroduction for myself also with the children and the proximity to their stories and to what life looked like for them on the day-to-day inspired me to want to make, again, kind of return to my own love of the story that, like, I think was foundational in a way. Yeah. And so, and then I was just like, I would love to, like, what does it mean to support? Or, like, not even support, right? But, like, what's the language that you would use for that, right? Like, what does it mean to, like, make visible some of these stories, right? To use a Reggio term, right? Or, like, within a format that is able to reach other children, right? Yeah. Or that like allows me to express ideas and explore ideas in different ways, and also this idea of like drawing as like processing my own thoughts and thinking, right? In another way of like, kind of like drawing as documentation for the self, right? Yeah. I don't know. Sorry, this is so weird.
No, I love that. I'm curious because now that you like mentioned about like drawing as a way of understanding what children are thinking, what do you feel about like how these like art or storytelling or play play like role in understanding these knowledge, understanding like what they are thinking, and like how can you as an educator support that?
Absolutely. I think that like in some ways, I think art, story, and play, like the way that they reveal knowledge is, and again, I don't know anything like, I think everyone has their own thoughts, right? I think it very much depends, but I think on some level, like, each of these things, there's, like, an open-endedness to them, if that makes sense, right? And so, like, I think they allow, like, they take away some of the pressure, often from the more, like, rote things that children are often required to, like, say or kind of spit back out, if you will, right? I think they also, like, invite us into a space of, like, play, like, I don't know, they all invite us into a space of playfulness, improvisation, this sort of like imagination is like kind of undergirds all of them, right? And I don't know how, I'm sure there's deeper research on there, but at least in my experience, like when I'm creating, like there's this idea, like it doesn't have to be any, right? Like I can make something cool or fun or exciting out of anything in the same way that telling a story can take twists and turns and be fascinating. And I think that play in the same way does that, right? And so I think what I'm trying to get at is this idea that like each of these like phenomena, like or each of these like, or the activities involved in each of these, right? Like it invites like a headspace for the person who's doing it or engaging in it to like have fun or imagine differently. And then it also, I think, serves as a prompt to us as educators, right? To say like, okay, like wait, like I'm not approaching a story or a piece of art or play in the same way that I'm approaching something like a math problem or
Yeah.
something, right? Which is it like also interesting and also valid and important,
Yeah.
right? But I think it invites us, perhaps when we see it, or at least I've experienced it, invites me when I see it to say like, huh, there's something here, and to, like it
Yeah.
makes me pause, right, and
Yeah.
say like, what is here? The richness here may not be immediately obvious, and I may need to pause and sit with it a little bit longer. And I think that allows us to be more alive to that knowledge, right? And to see like, okay, like wait, what is happening here, right? And we also have to, on some level, it also extends our engagement perhaps too with it. Again, this is just like, I feel like we're theory making on the go, right? But like when we ask a child about their art, or when we ask them about a story, or when we've been with them and we see like, oh, they played this last week and now the story's here, then we're starting to really also get alive to, or become aware and appreciate the ways that all these things connect, right? And so I guess through the dispositions that invites us into as well, those things kind of like art, story, and play, kind of bring us into contact with those knowledges in a different way.
I love that, because it also makes me think about the point of respect and like the point of like all of us are like equals in a classroom, not as an educator being like I have the authority, but it is most like okay, if and you're also kind of honoring their imagination through that. It's like so many times in schools when somebody like say like, oh no, this is not a dog, like this is not how a dog looks like.
Yes.
We see that, right? And it's like, no, like stop it, like this is more about what they are feeling and they're expressing.
Absolutely.
And the it is more much deeper than seeing like how the dog is made. It's like about understanding their interests and the views and the thinking they are thinking about. And I'm curious because you also work a lot with like photography and documentation, and I'm curious like what do you think like art allow us to notice about children's world, about their thinking, which is quote unquote very academically important, which we miss out on otherwise if you're just doing like a notebook, like how it happens.
So like what does like, and just make sure like what does like using art or something visual, even like a photograph, help us see about their thinking? Then I mean I think again it like on some level I was thinking about like the fact that it forces us to have I don't know, in some ways it has a like there's a conversation that happens around it, right? And not that like, not to like bring it back to the verbal, right? But I think there's something about like that different medium, right? Like I'm sorry, I'm looking behind you also at the wall of children's photographs here, but I'm like, I'm thinking, I've been thinking a lot about that, I guess. It was like, what do these photographs help us see? And what do these images help us, encounter that we couldn't otherwise? And I think there's just like, I know I sound like a broken record, right? But I think it really does bring us back to like, we have to think about their intention in some way, right?
Yeah.
About whatever that may be, whether it's to, like photographs, for example, whether it was to press the button, whether it was to take a picture that was composed in a certain way, whether they just kind of wanted to see what would happen, right? I think there are so many possibilities there, but I think that like a photograph, for example, invites us to really say like, like what was it, right? Like it's something that is like both super clear, this like mutual point of reference, and also like something that could mean anything. As an example, I was talking with one of the children the other day. So as part of like the Places We Play work, I've just been, again, it's still starting, it's still emerging, right? But like I've been talking to some of the children or getting their words from their parents if they haven't had time to schedule, just like, what are these about? What's going on here? And it was a photograph of a desk in Gottman, funny enough, right? And I was like, hey, and I'd initially seen it, and I was like, I was like, okay, this is interesting. I was like, sure, I don't know. I was like, oh, all right, well, maybe this one will go in, right? Because I'm curating a certain amount, right? And so, to be honest, right, we have those decisions are part of it. And I was like, and so then I had a Zoom, and I was talking with him and his mom, and she was like, oh, who's that? And I was like, oh, who is that? And there's a little blue thing in the picture on the desk that I hadn't really spent time with. And he was like, oh, that's like, that's like the sea creature, and like, he was saying that was like this, like his Stuffy's first trip out into the world, and he wanted to make sure that, and so I was like, oh wow, again, right? Like after all of these years, like working with children and like, doing really feeling like I respect children and I'm attuned to their possibilities. It's like, oh my goodness, here again, like, you know what I mean? In some ways it felt like such a, like it was beautifully humbling in a way as a reminder of like our constant need to linger and listen, right, in a way, right? And so for me, that lingering, that listening, is what photographs invite us into,
Mm.
right? To see things like that, to look at a scene and to be reminded like, oh wait, there's always more.
Yeah.
And you know, I think it also though, right? And I think there's also other things though too, right? And I think it depends, right? So sorry if I'm like rambling on. But I think, right, because I think that's one dimension of it,
Yeah.
right? It's like, how do I see this world?
Mm.
But then I think there's also like other, like some children do have a very particular thing that they want to show and a very particular way that they want it to look,
Yeah.
right? And so I think, again, photography, at least in my experience as this medium that I've been experimenting with and using in different ways, right? With young children for a little bit, right? Again,
Yeah.
I know there's lots of others who are doing it, but I think, you know, a thread I see is like the children also approach it very differently in a way, right? And so it also reinvites me to think like, there are lots of different ways to approach this too, right? Like someone might be very precise, someone might want to take the same photograph 3 times, and what I think it gets at ultimately is like, you know, the way that we pause to think about children's thinking through this thing that they've made. And I think we all learn that there are so many layers, right? Because also, and just to wrap this up, again, sorry if it's not exact, I hope this is at least, it feels useful, but like what I'm trying to say is like, I think that it's a medium that continues to uncover itself as we interact with it more, right? There's something that emerges in the conversation that like, may not even have been an original intention, but that suddenly both the maker of the photograph and also the encounterer, or the person who's co-encountering the photograph with its maker, suddenly is like, whoa, like here we are, like we found, like we co-discovered this together, right? In a way, and so, you know, I think again, for me that places we play photo was like is kind of really on. So that was a couple days ago. So it's like that was really that sticks really really freshly in my mind, right? And
I think what I love about this is also like, okay, photography is one medium, but as an adult and as an educator, how you're interacting with it is so much more like depth. It's like we're learning so much just by looking at the child. Like, you know, the child, it was so important for the child to kind of show the stuffed toy, the world, and just kind of take that maybe toy on an adventure through these photographs. And I think for me, what I'm like getting here is like how like the role of adults play here. And like how whenever you know sometimes people see a beautiful drawing or something, they're like, oh, this is beautiful, and then end of conversation. And they don't get into the depth of it to see what kind of things they're thinking about, what phenomena, what are the hypotheses which are kind of forming through these images. And I think that plays such a big role. And I'm curious to like hear from you about like how as adults we are looking at children's arts, you know, whatever different medium. When I say arts, it 100 languages, all kind of languages we can, like the child can have to express their body or their marks or just anything. And I'm curious like how like the adult interaction play a role here.
No, that's a great point. I mean, I think there's like this, you know, the first thing that comes to mind wherever it goes, right, is like I feel like children know when adults are seriously interested or respecting, right? You know what I mean? And so it's like they can tell, and I think that I think at the baseline, right, like that adult interaction is like it's important, and also like kids can tell, like they know, are like, is this person serious about this? You know, do they like, are they looking intent? Like, you know, there's so many cues, right? There's cues. Do you ask a follow-up? Do you hold space for their ideas to, like, are their ideas safe with you, right? So I think providing safety for their ideas, right? Like, not reacting. We don't have to be distant per se, right? I think there's moments probably where you choose to follow up or choose to express, just like in any conversation, right? But like a deep care and investment, are you seriously caring about this work, is essential for adult, you know? And then also like questions. Like, are we actually wondering about this? Are we okay to be wrong? Are we curious? And then two, like potentially opening space for collaboration as well. Right? Like I know I think about this a lot. Just because one of the things I use a lot is I use a floor book, and touching on my desk right now, but and that is a way that I often just invite children to co-make too, right? But like this idea, I guess what I'm saying is like the role of the adult is like we provide like our time, our energy, our focus. We ask questions. Of course, we also provide like extensions too, right? Like maybe we want to introduce a different material, but I think there's something really special about the attention, and I think we touched on this a little bit in just other conversations too, right? But about like, am I being seen truly? I think and I think that is the most important piece of that, right? And does this person have like the honesty, the humility to roll with me as I, maybe decide that this is now not a dog, maybe it's a wolf now. It's like, okay, are we rolling with it? Cool, awesome, right? Like, what do they allow me to have freedom? And at the same time, also like, is this a person who, like, do I want support as a child? And if so, is this person actually going to help? Like, where do we end up? Like, is where we end up, like, somewhere that feels toward where I was hoping to be? Because I think that's also really special. And I also think that's something that sometimes adults have, just like, can also do as well, right? Like, we were talking about, like, before, how the teachers in Reggio schools, right? Like, follow the lead. And it's like, yeah, when we follow the lead, and we also bring our own uniqueness too. Like we're also we're educators. Yes, we're also humans, right? And so not every human has the exact same set of, things, right? We're not all like, we all have a different palette.
Sure, like because it's like a long thing, but no, this makes
right?
it's like we can talk about this all the time because I think it's so important. Because I also like what it makes me think is like this early experience, because I also see a lot of adults saying like, oh, I'm not an artist, like I can't draw this, and oh, I'm not that creative, because they always kind of consider that kind of emotion through that. And it's not about like, you don't have to draw like a masterpiece, like it's not about putting somewhere or whatever, whatever that connotation comes with that, but it is more about your thoughts and thinking and things like. But in some classrooms, when I am there and I see kids being like, oh, can you draw me a unicorn, can you draw me a horse, like and because they don't like believe, or like believe is a big word, but in the sense like because maybe we had put that mindset in the kids very early on. I see. That you should these comparisons, like, oh, I can't draw like that, and oh, like, can you draw me this, like I don't know how to draw
this. Yes.
And I think that like the more you do, the more, because especially when I saw in Reggio, like they had an exhibition on pleasures of drawing, and they saw the mark making all across the ages and passion projects, and it even those like small marks are not less important or whatever, right? Like it's so much more.
Yes, it's so
and I feel it
more.
Starts early. Like if I'm seeing like a 5-year-old like hesitant to move a mark, I just imagine like how when they grow up, it kind of continues, and we forget. Again, like I think these early experiences of arts, in a sort of like arts is an example, obviously, but it can be so many things which are stopping the creativity and imagination.
Totally. I get what you're saying now. So yes, right? That's it. Even when we're let's say we might be drawing in the floor book, or I might be drawing it as part of research, or just drawing with children. Even now, it's like, sometimes a child will be like, well, can you draw this for me? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I want to invite them, right? There was a little boy who I, was in the classroom again. Shout out to Maggie and Betty at Newtown. Amazing. But like, I was doing research with him last year, and he did a beautiful series of drawings, right? But at first, I think he seemed less like inclined to draw, right? I think it was that sort of insecurity that, so again, probably 5 and a half, right, at that point, right? And so starting to understand, like, okay, like, maybe this isn't a thing that, like, I feel strong in, or I feel like I can do. And the marks that he made on the page were these, like, really, like, drawn fast and big, and kind of, like, in sort of shapes that you would only sort of be able to tell if you weren't there for the experience, right? But, I as our time went on, and over the course of the months that we kind of like, there's a whole other, much longer story, right? But like over the course of many months, the marks really didn't change much, but the confidence that he showed when he approached that experience did, and like the sort of way that he was able to, or chose to tell stories within using those with me, right? Like changed. It got just like, it was a part of the way that we started to communicate and make meaning in the world. And I learned about like life and like parents and grandparents and feelings, right? And and thoughts about the world, thoughts about the world, right? Again, all of these things that you're saying, like it was such a beautiful way for us to like, I think I'm sort of circling back maybe, but touching on that relationship, the role of the adult as listener. And then also, like that confidence and like, wait, like your marks are enough. and that is like, you can still use these to communicate with me, to get your ideas on paper, to share parts of yourself. I think that's really validating for young children, and it does start really early, which is and I think one of the things I try to remind myself, and I like to remind children also, is that like in the same way that there's lots of different styles of art, there's a bunch of languages, you have your abstract, you have your more formal stuff, right? It's like, again, saying this very inarticulately, but there's lots of different styles of drawing also for children, right? Like, it's okay, like maybe this, like these 3 marks is that mountain for you, and maybe someone else's mountain is snow-capped and has clouds around it, and like both of those are okay. They can both be, and so in some ways I think just like, again, holding that space for them, and pushing back actively, right? I think I'm also thinking about what you said as adult, about the role of adults often, right? I think it's for us to also gently push back against those like insecurities and misconceptions. And also, some of that also comes to sharing our own, right? Like, you can hold up a picture book, right? It's like, my drawing looks different than this drawing in this picture book. That's okay, right? Like, that's also fine, right? Everyone has again, we all bring our different things. It doesn't mean that I can't draw. It doesn't mean I shouldn't try. And it doesn't mean that my efforts are less worthy than others, right? So,
No, that's interesting, because it also makes me think about like like with art specifically. I'm not like kind of like teaching in a way that I'm expecting them to become professional artists. Like for me, it's a language of communication,
exactly.
right? Like how you say as like we do so much of storytelling and making, and that helps us understand about children's thinking. And I'm curious, like, okay, now that I move a little bit, I have like more pedagogical understanding with you. It's like, how have you seen these like different kinds of thinking and pedagogies which kind of helped you understand more about children's thinking, like, and what kind of phenomena, cause and effect you want to kind of introduce to them? Because I think it's so much about like child-led, but it is so much also about like how you bring these understandings and like build these curiosities with kids through different mediums.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Whoa, that's a powerful question. I will answer the best I can. Right now, as a researcher, especially, I can have the luxury of, I kind of just get to be curious with the children, purely just like curious with them about whatever's happening. And so for me, that does just mean like, I might be bringing in I was looking over there because I have these small colored pencils, for example, and it's like, we're going to explore, this will be with me today. Maybe you'll choose to use it, maybe you won't. Just holding that space for, I guess, them to experiment with it freely. To like just gently note, like, hey, this, you use this in this way. This may mean that like if you press really hard here, your paper may rip, right? That's all right. Like we can figure that out, but that may be a thing. This pen might not be as the one that you want to use if you're trying to get like deep color, and so on, right? So talking with them about kind of the different affordances is something that has always kind of been a part of, I guess, the way that I interact with them, especially when they're using it or using different materials. But again, I think really just like being curious with them about it. And I like to, at least my goal always is to just like be an adult who is like not pressuring, right? In a way, it's just like holding space for whatever happens, because, but I also think there's a line there, right, too, right? Because it's like, there's something about like, you don't want them to get frustrated, or I don't want them to get frustrated, right? Or like to feel like, oh, like this material can't do anything that I want, right? And so there is that baseline, and of course, like as a researcher, obviously, like their teachers have done a lot of that groundwork over the years. But again, it starts early, right? Like it's not just my bringing that material on that day, and it's the teachers that year, but then also the previous year and the previous year, right? But it's that thing that builds. And so in some ways, I think those dispositions are already present in the children, right? And so it's up to me as the adult entering into this engagement whether or not I will like continue to like provide a context as best I can where those can actually flourish. But I think that like I think that's like that's kind of how it's been for me. That's how it's been in my experience, of course, right? But,
I'm curious, like, so because you share about this, like, the idea of, like, quality and aesthetics, I would like to get into a little bit more and kind of understand, like, how that is developed. Like, if, like, I don't know, for me, it's like, I would love to, like, push them in the sense of, like, giving them materials which might be a little frustrating,
Sure,
but just to and we do it together.
Absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
I don't give them. I was like, okay, let's try this together.
Right,
That's my motto generally with kids. And I'm curious because I think that is also a misconception we have with arts is like, oh, it's whatever, it's like 2D, that's fine. But it's like we are also building that language because you said like you bring these different materials and we are testing the paper, we are testing like right, there's so much of like thinking which is going around with using a material, and your brain is okay, like feeling it, like of course, like you're drawing, but it's also like your brain is thinking about these things. It's like, oh, if I tear the paper, or the tape, like if the paper can take only this much paint, like what is the quantity of water I should add to my paper, and or like to and like fro and fro, all of these kind of things.
It's like all of these logistics that are happening in your mind, right? As you go about this, I think that's great, right? I think it's interesting, and again, like I'm thinking like. It's funny, right? Like it is this thing of like, am I bringing watercolor paper today? Am I using like printer paper today? Which one is? Or am I using a piece of cardboard today to draw on, right? And to be able to have the experience of drawing on each of those and interacting with each of those. I mean, again, right? Like I was thinking about this was a few years ago now, but once what you said reminded me of when my co-teacher Abby, when I was at nature school, one time like we had a class of like. It was a mixed age between like 3 and 5 year olds, but she was really interested in like this idea of like what supports can we use. Again, I think also inspired by Reggio, and I think we also looked a little bit at Mosaic of Marks. And she was like, oh, she brought in all of these different ways to like all these different types of paper, right? Like. She had like a piece of cardboard that had been like ripped open, and so all the corrugation was visible. And then we had like toothy watercolor paper, of course the usual printer paper, a piece of newsprint, right? Maybe a piece of vellum or something in there too, right? And it's like, and I remember the children were like all just like really, it was a funny day, right? Because at least for us, it shook us out of our normal. Right, our usual habits. Again, in nature school, a lot we would use because we were often on the go. It was usually just like a pad, much like this, right? Like a floor book or just a sketch pad, which is also again great. But that was such a fun experience because you really, again, we saw the children being like, oh, I don't like know what to do with this in a way, and it was funny because I remember watching her and she's like, I don't really know what to do with this either. But I think there's this like. A willingness to try something new, right, is important. And again, I think I love what you said too about entering into the frustration with them too, right, or like the experiment with them too, because I think it also speaks to the way that we honor ourselves as humans, also still inquiring. Like one thing it makes me think about is like we don't have to know everything about a material before we introduce it and work with a child with it, right, and that. Again, like pushing a little bit, like because we know it also provides them a breakthrough, right? It builds a fluency with that language, and or like it builds an experience of like, this isn't a language that they want. This is not the tool to use to do what I want to do, right? And in some ways, we give them like that ability to like they are allowed to decide. Right, in that way, and so it does open up a space for that freedom, and so I think it's a fascinating and super interesting. I think this is also right though, and sorry not to like get on this, but I guess it does bring to light, which I think is beautiful, like the different roles of different adults in life, right? Like as a preschool teacher, like my role was different. Like as a researcher, now I get to be the guy who just holds space for whatever, and it's like it's like, do you want me to draw a circle? It's like. Maybe, like, sure, maybe I'll do it, but sometimes I'm like, great. Whereas, like, someone who facilitates and creates an artistic or creative space, like, you might be like, let's push ourselves, right? Yeah. And each of those is actually really powerful, and each of them sends a really beautiful message that there are people who hold space, and also I know I can go here and, like, push myself here, right? Yeah. And, like, I think in some ways it reminds me of just, like, how, like the importance of like a really beautiful and engaged community, like beautifully caring, right, and engaged community of adults as well. And I don't know, it just always makes me really smile because it's like I'm actually really happy that children have access to, and the children that do that they can have access to all these different adults in their lives and stuff like that. So like what I was thinking about in talking, like when you were mentioning about the role of adults and like how
like she brought these papers and she was
Yes.
willing to put in that effort to think about that with
Yeah.
kids. And I'm curious, like, what is your thinking about aesthetics of a place?
Mm.
Especially, like, how are we bringing
Yeah.
that inviting atmosphere without obviously, like, you know, like, quote unquote, having a lot of resources around. But
Yeah.
how do we bring that curiosity, if I can say, and creativity in a space without it feeling like it has too many resources around?
Because it's like on some level, it's like you want children to be able to focus on a few things and not to get like. In some ways, it's like it could be distracting if there's a lot of materials around, but also could be really inspiring for some children, right? And so it's like, I think how do you like, you know, I think it's also just all about knowing your children too, or knowing your space, or also knowing the goals that you have for a particular art exploration, right? You know, I know that lots of folks will keep things on shelves, but in sight, right? So that you can see and be inspired and maybe think, maybe I might use that someday. But then also I think there's something what you said too about like the aesthetics of a space, and I think there's like I have multiple views on this, and they are so contradictory.
I love that.
So like on some level, I like on a lot of days I'm like I think children honestly like as long as there is a space enough for them to not be like super distracted. Honestly, sometimes don't think kids care at all.
Yeah.
Like they're probably like in some ways and I think it speaks to their like they're just like the intensity perhaps of the creative drive. Like it's gonna happen no matter what. Like children will create. People are creative, and really they're really flexible. And at the same time, there's something about the way that a space is set up when it is like intentionally set up that it really can direct the eye, it can direct the interest, it can stoke that curiosity, right? And so I love a space that has like a few materials out on the table, right? And I also think again, right? And I think it's this like, so I think like on some level, the children will work with what is in front of them. I think many children also have a particular interest in a certain material that they maybe develop. And then also I think that having though the aesthetic of the space, like it also affects us as teachers, as adults, people working in the space, right? And it allows us to focus our attention more on the interaction that's happening, on the unfolding of the arts experience, whatever that may be, right? And so, you know, I think there's and then there's also things about like, well, how is it stored? Where is it stored? How many shelves are you using? Are you using warm colors, cool, right? There's like the basics of the warm, but the curation of materials.
But I feel like also that's also very something not everybody thinks about that too. I do feel like that because I think like the curation, like how you're putting the materials, right? It's like randomly sorted, or are you thinking thoughtfully about okay, I want to do just warm colors or cold colors or complementary colors, and I think that also is something. I mean, if you have any like experience or like any conversations about this with teachers, because I feel like I have not seen that everybody thinks about the aesthetics in that deeper level in some classrooms too.
You know, I appreciate that perspective, and I feel like children are often fine with lots of things. However, I think they can totally read care and intention when it is like put into a space, right? And so, you know, whether that like I'm just thinking back again to things I'm seeing now and things I've done in the past, but it's like, you know, like I'm looking at a basket on the top shelf. It's like, okay, maybe I bring this basket of markers to, you know, to things today instead of like having them kind of jumbled around on the table or in the big bin with 30,000 markers in there. It's like, maybe we'll have like 10 and they're going to be in this little basket and you can kind of carry here, there, and it's going to be here. And it's going to be next to like a piece of paper or a few pieces of paper. And maybe I only have 4 there. Maybe there's only 4 there right now. And so it changes the way that you choose to engage with each piece of paper, right? I think that like, you know, I mean, that's one small example, right? But again, like, is it sorting the warm colors versus the cool colors, or all the different hues of brown, or all the different hues of blue, or all the, you know, all like, there's a way, each of those is an entirely different, like, experience that can be so meaningful, so beautiful. I also think aesthetics and you know, like it makes me think. And of course, I love documentation, right? But it makes me think about documentation as well, right? So like, what is around the space? What is next to the art easel that I'm painting on? What is next to the table where I'm doing my drawings, right? What do I see? Where does my eye rest? You know, like when I'm sitting down in a child-sized chair, right? Where's my eye then, right? And so I think the aesthetics is of the experience, but also of the space, of the environment. Where in the room is it, of course, too, right? Like, is it in a busy spot where other children might, where I couldn't be distracted, but also people might come in and peek in and say like, oh, that's cool, right? And maybe build on it with me or notice it more. There's also that pedagogical layer of like, do I want more children to notice this thing right now? And do I want them to come be part of this? Or do I want it to be a smaller experience and therefore put it out of a space? But then again, to bring it back to aesthetics, also like a cozy nook is very different than a busy table in the middle of the room, is very different than another sort of table or the floor, right? And all of those things can be wonderful spaces, right? But I think it depends on the intention that you take for it. And so I just want to, I guess, to wrap it all up or just to bring it, it's like, I think that care is evident. And I think that like, whatever it is for you, disrupting the normal or disrupting the default presentation of a material can be really, really powerful, right?
Yes.
And so I think for me, often like it was like moving it from like the plastic carton or thing into like something softer, a basket or a printed bag that you kind of go in and draw out of, or onto a tray, right? Like very Montessori, right? Like okay, a tray that we have, and this is our little art space, and we work in this space, and it feels really special. Right now, Maggie and Betty have a little nook in their classroom that is like tucked away, and they have like a light at the top. Beautiful. Again, like all of those things are these aesthetic choices that invite, that they really just invite children to engage and invite us to attend in really great ways. And also, sorry, another thing is I think aesthetics also like forces us again to think about like, what do we want from this experience, right? It's like, am I putting, like, if I'm working with warm colors, why warm colors today, right? And what is there to learn from warm colors? Like, what is there to learn from warm colors, right? What do they communicate to me? What am I hoping for from my engagement with this? And so I think there's, again, a million layers.
No, I also love that because it makes me think about like how this experience and this thoughtfulness could be used by all years. Because when I also like work with older children, I'm like, why do we not bring this care and this same level of aesthetics for older children? Like, I just think about like my art classroom like in my older years, and I feel like if I had these like, I don't know, like it's just like this setup. I'm sure like a lot of other kids would also feel invited.
Yes.
And also like how as a teacher we look at the care. I feel like even like if I because I work a lot with like waste materials.
Yes.
It's not like a randomly, like it's not something random. Like I thoughtfully think about what kind of colors to go together. It's like clean, it's safe for children to use, and they also feel like cared. And I think it also brings a deep sense of value for them. It's like, how do I value things around me? And I feel like it's so much deeper.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Totally, right? Like part of the reading of care and part of the intentional is also reading like, I also treat this with care. Like someone cared about this material. They care about me and the way that they arrange it. They're inviting me, and I also now care for this material and this interaction in this space, right? And so totally, so like we've gone a full circle. Like kids don't care about it at all. So no, children actually really do care. They do, right? This is part of the fun of like talking all these things out, right? It's like, again, and I think, and whenever I say things like children don't mind, it's not because I feel like I'm explaining myself, but I think I say it less about like that. I think I say it just to encourage folks to begin where they are. And also at the same time, you're so right. Like, I'm thinking about like, you might have something plastic and it's like, okay, but like, where is it? What's it held in? How is it bought out, right? Where does it end up, within this space, right? It's like, it can become a beautiful tableau, right? And like, what is this material sat next to, right? Like, or is it sat next to other materials? Is it sat like, and even something as simple as like the color of the paper, right? Like, does your watercolor paper come in cream, or is it bright white, or is it or is it a tan? Like the notebook I have here is like a tan paper, which is an entirely different experience, right? Excuse me. And so I think all of those things are, aesthetic choices that we make, and like it's fascinating. And so and I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's just really being intentional, like you said, about like, am I presenting this with care? What sort of caring interactions do I hope to see? And and what am I hoping to, like, what do I want to learn as an educator, and what do I hope children explore and experience with these?
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
it's so
beautiful.
fun.
And I think now towards like going towards the end of this
Yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
also I'm curious because you mentioned this here and there about like
Yeah.
questions and asking
Yeah.
questions, and I'm curious like because right with children's work we are also looking at like visibility, like how do we make their learning visible, and the outcome is one part of it, but it is so much about the process of asking those questions, and I've seen that a lot of people sometimes we stop this open-ended question does not come easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It takes so much of intellectual work on yourself and also being just like open, like you're not giving answers to the kids, we are just trying to open up their thinking with what they're making. And I think because and why I say that, because it also helps in bringing this level of cognitive development which is happening, which we also miss out on. Like fine, it's beautiful, whatever, right? You know, that's the outcome is there. But
it's so real.
it's so much of the process which we are going through, that making in the storytelling. If they're making a character, what are they choosing, like what are the intentions, that also tells so much about their background and just so much deeper than that. And I'm like so like frustrated sometimes when people just see the final product, like okay fine, it's beautiful, but I want to know the backstory of it.
Right, it's like, so I know this backstory. I want to know like what you were thinking about when you did this, and like what does this reveal about what you actually think about, like what it means to like go on an adventure or be a band or like have a right? Like those things are fascinating, and like and meanings also like. And I love what you said about the product is only one part, right? Because like we, process is so rich, and like meanings even emerge over time. So that product that you see there isn't like everything. Like you revisit that 2 weeks later, a year later with that child, with another group of children, the interpretations and the meanings can shift, right? And so I love that too, because I think, we ask open-ended questions, like you said, to support children in their like metacognitive processes, to also, allow them to give a different sort of voice, right? To like, again, like to vote to, or even like to verbalize the intentions that they may have brought to it, to verbalize more of the associations, to imagine, to improvise, to shift and change, right? Sometimes also they totally will just prefer to not say anything at all. And sometimes those are always so interesting, because in some ways I feel like sometimes they protect those things for themselves perhaps, or even just like are like, I'm not ready to share, right? Which is also okay. But process is so, is powerful. And I guess what I'm trying to say though is like the process extends on either side of the product, right? Like it's before and after, right? And so the process extends on either side of the product, right? And I think that is it. So like once it's done, we don't stop those questions. What does it feel like to see this now? Oh, what do you notice here again? I wonder if you would add anything to this, if you would take anything away. How do you feel, like, oh, like, look, this is your friend's artwork. What do you think? Or this is a creation that was made. I'm wondering how I feel now. All these ways of like just approaching a work without needing to, like, there's on some level, I think the open-ended question too, like, we have to be comfortable not knowing, right? And comfortable with an answer that like maybe doesn't quite make the sense that we expected, right? Or say the thing that we expected. And there's a degree of patience and this respect. And a word I wrote down earlier actually also was this idea of like time scales too, right? So again, like, even our questions, they're supporting the development, or sort of allowing children to like show us their development in certain areas, and also like the time scale that they're working on, and that is so it's really vast, right? And so on some level there's like we have to respect that as well too. I
love that. No, that actually that is so important, the after part, which I actually did not think about. I always think about the before part. So I love that you mentioned about the after part of the work, which I think is so important, and I actually haven't thought a lot about that, so thank you for bringing that up. I would like to like think about it more with kids.
For sure.
And okay, so like now that like I think to summarize, I would love to know like if there was any interaction which kind of lived with you about like arts as an importance of arts, which you felt, maybe a conversation or something which you saw.
I think the thing it comes back to for me, or just that I have like the word that comes like that keeps jumping out at me is just this relationship, and the way that like it invites us into like maybe it's a slower relationship, a more intentional relationship, a respectful relationship with ourselves and our interiority, and also like with others, and just, you know, the invitation that it gives us to really like pause and sit with a person, human, in front of us. Because like you said, the world today is like, can feel very fractured, is really fractured in a lot of ways, and you know, like the processes of like reflection that art involves, the processes of like, you know, allowing us to process things for ourselves, or inviting others into the ways that we're thinking, and the vulnerability that it often entails, or they're just all really important things to keep close in these times, especially. And so I think that would be, I think for me that would be it, right? Just like relationship is it, for like truly, 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 relationship.
Yeah, thank you. That's so beautifully said, because again, relationship is so underrated, right? It's like if you just milk a relationship with a kid, you do wonders. It's okay if the child is not, you know, like learning in your terms right now. Try to like understand where are they coming from, instead of just like forcing, you know, like in the sense of like, okay, do this. Why are you not learning? Like, you know, all of those frustrations which I have seen as like, no, like go back 10 steps,
go back 10 steps and stay in that step, and see like, and actually see that there's richness there, there's depth there, and we have to be patient, you know.
The last thing I ask is like, what is one question you're sitting with right now, which you would like to explore more?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Gosh, oh my gosh. Let's see, what's a question I would like to explore more? I'm wondering about, right now, like, what, like, I think it's like, it's not, and maybe not the most revolutionary question, I think, but something I return to time and again, like, what does true collaboration look like with children, when it comes to, you know, like, making, or like, visions of the world, of their worlds, through different media, through drawing, through art, through photography, as they're behind you, and story, right? And we're really curious about, what does like true collaboration look like, and what is like, how do I, as an adult who is genuinely part of the interaction, how do I show up within these processes and artifacts that begin to emerge? How am I showing up here? And am I like, how am I also giving space for this to be authentic and honest? And what is my role in this collaboration? Right? Let's all collaborate more.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. It's so lovely to understand more about your work and life, and it's been so inspiring to me. And I'm sure so many whoever listens is so inspired.
Thank you.